What is going on, spicy people? How you doing? This is the first CoinSpice Live. Welcome aboard. I am your host, Peter Ryan. Please follow me on Twitter. You can see the link right there. It's so great to have you all with us. It's going to be an exciting project that we're launching. We're going to cover news. We're going to cover tweets, because why not? We're going to cover some really cool interviews, and we have other cool segments that are in store. So just hold on. What I want you to do also is make sure you interact in the chat room. Also, please tip in Bitcoin Cash, because that's what we're all about here. We're all about using Bitcoin. If you don't know CoinSpice, CoinSpice is using first, not hodling, not trading, but using. So we want you to use Bitcoin to tip us. Your name will show up down there. It will show up in another corner. Make sure that you're looking at the link above, and you can find the link in the description. And if you want some awesome CoinSpice content like this show or other great videos that we have going on, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as well as follow us on all our other social media platforms. Great. So without further ado, let's jump into the news. All right. So here we go. So our first story of the day. Oh, look, we got a donation right there. Thank you so much. And we're up. Okay, first story of the day. We're going through our In Case You Missed It series, where we just summarize some of the stories that maybe didn't get to the top of your funnel, that we make sure that you get into your feed. So the US Congress targets crypto industry, and it's using Facebook's new Libra coin as a pretext. They just did a bill called Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act. And there's penalties for companies that have over 25 billion if they try to do anything like this. Government's trying to prevent, the private sector from getting in on this. We've seen the scorn that Facebook has manifested, and we'll get to a little bit more of that later. Bitcoin is always volatile. No new stuff there. We are now looking at Tether, everyone's favorite stablecoin. They accidentally printed about 5 billion new units when they were really only supposed to print 50 million. And the alleged rationale for why it happened was because a decimal point got misplaced. Pretty top shelf people over there. Next, there's a think tank from DC came out and said, cryptos are pretty dangerous at subverting US dominance when they want to place sanctions on their adversaries. Again, if you've been around this industry long enough, not new news to you. Also, BitMEX finally releases that full debate with Nouriel Roubini and its CEO Arthur Hayes. Make sure to check that out. We've been hearing clips. We've been hearing both sides sniping at each other. This is a chance to maybe get the full story. I highly suggest going into that. Our next round of In Case You Missed It. Thank you again for the donation right above there. Awesome to see. Our next story is Alan Turing is now on the 50-pound note. Even though the pound is fiat currency and we all have our hangups about fiat currency, Alan Turing is, you could say, part of that pantheon of forefathers of cryptography in a very large sense. Seeing him get recognized on money has some sort of spiritual quality to it that is signifying that cryptography and money are somehow linked, whether the people that made that decision are realizing it or not. Next, after Iran was going through A lot of back and forth. Do they like cryptocurrency? Do they not? They're actually starting to reveal some plans for a gold-backed cryptocurrency sanctioned by the government. And they obviously see the value in the ability to subvert sanctions thanks to that think tank report. I wonder if they caught that. And instead of having a independent cryptocurrency that's out there, they might see this as a step and a bridge to adopting that type of technology for themselves. So that would be an interesting story to watch for sure as governments become more and more embroiled with this. Indian cryptocurrency law draft leak, digital rupee introduced. Another example of these blockchains coming into the state realm. Caitlin Long rejects weaponizing the dollar on testimony to Senate. She gives her 2 cents there. We'll be sure to follow up on some Twitter happenings a little later. Chinese police uncover mining power theft, 4,000 miners confiscated. And IMF paper, Rise of Digital Money, warns about rapid e-money adoption. And finally, Cash Shuffle reaches 100,000 BCH shuffled. It's a pretty big feat. And if you do not know what Cash Shuffle is, it allows you to anonymize your Bitcoin even better than the default pseudonymous nature of it right now. It basically pools a bunch of transactions and wallets and people together into a swirling, you could say vortex, of mix matching, of outputs of inputs that go out, and it basically creates a very difficult situation for people to actually track and identify who had that original Bitcoin in the first place. So adoption is growing. I expect to see more out of them. So moving on to our next story. We have, thanks again for the Bitcoin Cash donation up there. On to the next story. So we have the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, warns of cryptocurrency. That is pretty big. We had Donald Trump coming out and tweeting about Bitcoin, sort of out of the blue, sort of direct jab at Facebook's Libra. But it's really astonishing to see, formal senior members of the U.S. government come out, hold specific, whether it's hearings or it's a press conference like this, detailing what their views are, what their protocols and advice are for people dealing with cryptocurrencies. So the general, situation that Mnuchin described was they're not wanting to outlaw all cryptocurrencies, but they want to prioritize that it's not being used for illicit services, products, and especially like the bullet points we've been mentioning, subverting U.S. government sanctions on their adversaries. So he's reiterating those key points. And for a lot of us, we've heard those already. But also he's definitely tacking on the whole Facebook Libra concept and putting a warning out to them, especially, hey, you can't go out with your 2 billion users and just start a private currency that may or may not really start actually making the US dollar sweat, as much as we like to think, Bitcoin makes them sweat already. So expect to see more out of the government with official statements there. So moving on to the next story. So we had, actually, speaking of Libra, one of their senior suits, Mr. Marcus, sat down in the Senate to testify and answer questions from U.S. senators about how they will use Libra, what is the technology, what are the plans. There was a lot of back and forth. There was definitely some grandstanding by different senators, some saying, I want to be the tough guy to say, I'm not going to let you do this. Other ones, you could say the tough cookies of the bunch were people like Senator Crapo. And then you could say some of the more dovish, cuddly folks were people like Senator Toomey, who really wanted to vocalize that they were in favor of cryptocurrencies and blockchains and fostering this technology. So this is something that there was a little bit of a mixed reaction. Facebook suit was smooth as you would expect, no doubt there, but there was definitely some back and forth. I believe it was Senator Tester who came out of the gate and really started throwing some jabs at him and got to this question that was very, very funny to have Marcus on the hot seat. He goes, well, if you have so much confidence in this Libra coin, what do you think about accepting 100% of your compensation in it? And Marcus fluttered around about 3 circulations of that question, and then finally came to the answer of, well, yeah, I would, but Libra's not supposed to replace bank deposits. So, yeah, so he sort of said yes, he sort of said no. He kind of refuted the monetary application of Libra in a sense, and backpedaled into a little bit of a, hey, this is an asset to store your value in, and there definitely was some confusion that at least I observed from that. So, yeah, I don't think there'll be any direct action that will penalize Facebook outside the topics we've already discussed from this hearing, but this is, again, a symptom of perhaps the wider issue of big tech versus politics and how politicians see that they need to actually rope these tech corporations in with whatever project they're doing, whether this is specifically about cryptocurrency or not. Once again, thank you for tipping in Bitcoin Cash. CoinSpice is all about using Bitcoin, not hodling, not trading, actually using, paying for goods and services that you actually think are dope. If you want to tip, see the link right above at tippin.cash. You can also find the link in the description below. Please check that out and support us. Moving on to our next story. And it's a very special story. We have Vitalik Buterin proposing Bitcoin Cash as a temporary scaling solution for Ethereum. So this is pretty wild in a sense that it isn't a merger, but it's more like a minor integration of 2 blockchains. You have a computation layer from the ETH side, and you have a data layer from the BCH side. And the marriage that Vitalik proposes as an idea from his research blog, which we also link in the description below, please check that out, that there can be this symbiosis where there can be an offloading of data from Ethereum into Bitcoin Cash that helps Ethereum scale so it can do all the cool smart contract stuff that it wants to do. And because Bitcoin Cash has bigger blocks, low transaction fees, and a host of other good properties, it really makes a lot of sense to park that data in there and start scaling up, at least temporarily. And we actually have Vitalik on in a few minutes at an exclusive interview to talk about his ideas more at length, talk about how Bitcoin Cash works in, and what he sees from the Bitcoin Cash community. So, yeah, be sure to stick around for that. We don't want you to miss it. And again, Vitalik has also mentioned on previous occasions that he's, not non-supportive of the Bitcoin Cash project. And this was definitely something that was a surprise, but if you knew his past compliments of the community, you might have seen this as something of, not too crazy that's out of the blue. Now, here's the original research blog that Vitalik posted. I highlighted a few sections for you to see here. In the longer term, they're going to scale on Ethereum. They're going to do Ethereum 2.0. He's really talking about this as a short-term immediate step to actually solve some of the scaling solutions. Whether that transforms in the future, that's yet to be seen, but that was the statement. The pros that he mentioned was, again, the high data throughput, the very low fees, that there's already machinery and work to actually get this done based on BTC applications with the BTC relay. And also just the BCH community in general is very friendly. And he throws out the opinion that they would perhaps be open to this and it would hopefully rub everyone the right way. However, he did throw out a main weakness. The BCH chain has the 10-minute block times, and that could be problematic, but there is the possibility that we're advancing with zero comps and we're working on things like the Avalanche pre-consensus. So these are all things that can actually start optimizing in that direction, but still with those 10-minute block times, there still can be immediate solutions for Ethereum scaling right now with Bitcoin Cash. So this was definitely a wild story that came out of the gate. If Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum team up, that's number 2 market cap, that's number 5 market cap, that's, the top transaction volume, that's the top transaction count coins, you name it, them coming together, who knows exactly what that offspring would be. And now we are done with Spice News. And we have a quick segment from our friend, our pal, our buddy, Mr. Mike in Space. You might know him from Bitcoin Car Talk, and he's joined us to give us a little report of his own. So if you like Mike in Space, if you really like him after this segment, please tip in Bitcoin Cash. Go to that tipping address above the screen. You can find that link in the description below. And let's see what Mike has to say.
Good morning, I'm Mike in Space with your daily mempool report. Well, not a lot of surprises today. We're seeing a gradual increase in the transaction backlog as we climb into the mid-200 satoshis per byte. Now, we have been tracking a few potential events that may cause congestion later in the week, such as this pump tweet. We used 3 rocket ship emojis, which is a very bullish indicator, guaranteed to create a lot of FOMO buys. And of course, Bitfinex just printed another 2 billion tethers that will surely pump the price, create a lot of on-chain activity. So you're going to want to get your sell orders in before the whales wreck you. And of course, Coinbase is still not bashing those f***ing asshole sons of bitches. Back to you, Peter.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mike in Space. Fantastic. We always need to know that information. Whether you're going out on the run, you're at home, you want to buy some stuff with Bitcoin, you need to know this stuff. So once again, if you appreciate the show, if you appreciate Mike in Space, if you appreciate Bitcoin Car Talk, not only follow him on Twitter, go to his YouTubes, check out his videos, but tip in Bitcoin using the link above and the link below in the description. So once again, thank you, Mr. Mike in Space. We are moving on now to seeing what Twitter is all about. So let's jump over.
Good morning, I'm Mike in Space with your daily mempool report.
Ooh, we don't want Mike in Space.
Good morning, I'm Mike in Space.
There we go. That's what we want. So here we go. Let's explore the Twitterverse a little bit. Let's see what people's spicy takes, cold takes, salty takes are, and just get a little bit of that flavor. So we have the top crypto tweets of the week. We have Donald Trump's tweet, obviously that's a huge one, and we have a bunch of pundits from the crypto sphere commenting on it. We have Caitlin Long talking about how Wyoming, the state that gave you the highest margin of victory, welcomes law-abiding crypto companies, and that his staff is misleading him. Mr. Stephen Pally talks about how prisons are filled with criminals who use fiat currency for illegal purposes. The argument Bitcoin is bad because criminals use it is not a serious one. So there was a few other people that chimed into Trump's comments to try to get him to see some of that. Next up, we have one of the Bitcoin Cash application developers, Mr. Poxt, kind of going at it with Mr. Fluffy Pony, the maintainer of Monero. And it was over a discussion of there's PayFast that's not integrating BTC anymore. And Fluffy Pony was kind of, getting flustered about the entire thing. And Pox and him got into this, back and forth about how, Bitcoin Core, BTC, is not suitable as a medium of exchange. And this is why businesses have to keep delisting it. This is a common thing we've seen over and over again. Microsoft, other video game services, a bunch of other businesses have removed, crypto and Bitcoin as a way of paying because the fees are too high, because the confirmations are too long. And this is synonymous with it. You can jump into that thread, see the rest of those juicy details right there, which I'm sure are good. We had this funny little exchange where a Wells Fargo employee reached out and says, unfortunately, they do not allow transactions involving cryptocurrency. So if, in case you're trying to hook up, anybody to Cash App, Coinbase, whatever, Wells Fargo is not friendly. And number one tweet, it got the whole world talking. This was everywhere. Our own Hayden Otto, everybody, the Aussie with attitude, the Spice Boy Supreme, detailed live, one of the first people to break the story of what was going on with Tron. He was covering the latest happenings of riots outside of Tron office. There was police. No one knew what was happening, and he was giving the live updates as it was transpiring. He talked about how ultimately this ended up being a riot of people that were scammed by some other institution that were maybe mislabeling Tron, but found an association nonetheless. And the police were actually there to kind of protect the office from the rioters. And Justin Sun actually commented directly on this thread by Hayden and clarified what was going on. You can jump into that thread and see a lot more. We're not going to talk about this. Anyway, that was the hot tweets of the week that we just covered. We'll be covering Twitter a lot more. Twitter is a huge component of crypto, and be sure to see that in future episodes. And so let's move on to what we're all waiting for. We have the exclusive interview. Yes, the exclusive interview with Vitalik Buterin. He is coming on, give us his takes, what's going on with the state of Ethereum scaling, what is going on with this idea with Bitcoin Cash, how can this all work together, and what does he see as sort of the grand vision of Bitcoin Cash and its community. So here we go. All right. We are joined by Vitalik Buterin to talk about Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and scaling solutions. So
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for being here, Vitalik. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. So you caused some commotion when you went into a blog post recently talking about scaling solutions, and in particular, how Bitcoin Cash and perhaps other blockchains can be utilized. Can you summarize the current state of Ethereum scaling?
Sure. So just to kind of get into what that post actually kind of contained in more detail, the
Sure.
general idea is that, so about layer 2 protocols, so things like Plasma and the Lightning Network and payment channels, right? So those kinds of layer 2 protocols scale both computation and data. right? So the principle is that you have a base blockchain, and that base blockchain has a very low amount of scaling and a very low amount of computation and a very low amount of data. So like Bitcoin, for example, 1 megabyte every 600 seconds, 1.7 kilobytes a second. Ethereum's about 8. Bitcoin Cash is not too much more, but still considerably more at about 53. So you take a blockchain that has relatively low computation and data throughput, and you use that as a base to create a system that sits above the blockchain that has a much higher transaction throughput. So Plasma does this, things like the Lightning Network do this. Now, these kinds of layer twos are nice and they have a lot of properties to them, but the fact that you need to layer twoify both computation and data puts a lot of very serious limitations and kind of complexities on building these kinds of platforms. So the Lightning Network, for example, has been having challenges with all of these complexities of implementation. I mean, Plasma's gotten a lot of progress with Plasma Cash and which is some of the more recent flavors and a lot of the nice kind of generalization work that the Plasma group has been doing. But even there, and of going to fully generalize Plasma, so going to using Plasma to say create an Ethereum-like blockchain, just has a lot of difficulties to it. Like to make the construction really work well, a lot of the time you basically just need these full-scale zero-knowledge proofs like snarks. So that's if you need to scale both computation and data. Now, one question you might want to ask is, well, it looks like data might be a bit cheaper than computation, right? And for example, we've been seeing Moore's Law slowing down recently, so computation's not been getting cheaper that quickly. But on the other hand, data seems to be cheaper, and internet keeps on getting faster, hard drives getting bigger. I mean, we're talking about like 5G rollouts in a few years and all of these things. So at the same time, we have sharding as this longer term thing that would allow a huge amount of scalable computation and data, but getting to scalable data is something that's simpler and will happen sooner. So what if you have scalable data, but not scalable computation? Can you build a layer two that just scales computation? And the answer is yes. And it's actually not that difficult to build things that are really useful and very general purpose. So back in 2014, I wrote this blog post. It's called Scalability Part 1, Building on Top. Maybe you can find it later and link it to people. One of the ideas I have at the end is this thing called shadow chains, where I basically say you have this blockchain where you have blocks that get published inside of another blockchain, and basically you don't actually calculate the state transition function. So you don't actually verify and process the transactions of this blockchain directly. Instead, what you do is you have nodes, like basically anyone could just spin up a node and be a validator in the scheme, and they would send transactions that say, this is what I think the result of processing this last block is, like this is some local hash of the new state, and here is 10 ETH, and if you can later prove that I computed this particular block incorrectly, you can burn the 10 ETH. And so then there is this challenge period of maybe 2 weeks within which any particular block can be challenged. And if a block doesn't get challenged long enough, the block gets accepted. So unless some people are acting dishonestly, in which case they would lose lots of money, you don't need to actually run the computation on chain. Right, so this is also the principle behind things like TrueBit, for example. So another example of this is I published this blog post on ETH Research a few months ago that was called Scaling Blockchains to 500 Transactions per Second. And this was this technique that did the same thing, except it was slightly different. Instead of using this interactive computation game approach, it used ZK snarks. So it basically said, here's a block of data, and this block of data contains records about what account balance has changed. And here is this zero knowledge proof that proves that this thing is valid. And you can verify this proof really quickly, and it proves that some valid stuff happens to make those changes happen. But you don't actually have to go through the process of verifying the computation yourself because this zero knowledge proof does it for you. So with both of these kinds of techniques, right, you can basically take a base layer system that has data and a bit of computation, and build a second layer thing that has a lot of throughput, but where it still has like these very general purpose properties and these still very strong scalability and this or security guarantees that are almost the same as those of layer one systems. So this kind of research interests the Ethereum community a lot because we have this attitude where we, I guess, really care about minimizing the complexity of the consensus layer. So minimizing the complexity of what like every node in the system needs to run to just stay in sync with and validate the chain. Basically, in part just because what we're doing with sharding is pretty complicated already, and so you do have to really try hard to just push the complexity down. And then on top of that, you can build these layer twos and add these more complicated forms of computation. And you can do really fancy things like simulate like 500 millisecond block times on top of chains that have like 10-second or longer, even 5-minute block times if they're sharded. And you can do lots of interesting things, right? So yeah, so that's the general kind of spirit in which these suggestions come. So in the long term, we expect the data layer for these schemes to be Ethereum 2.0 itself. And Ethereum 2.0 we expect will be a pretty powerful data layer, 1,024 shards multiplied by an average of maybe 16 kilobytes per 3 seconds on each shard. So we're basically talking about 5 megabytes a second. And if you crunch the numbers yourself, ZK rollup, for example, requires 11 bytes a transaction, 5 megabytes a second divided by 11, 450,000 transactions a second if everyone uses it in this way and you like set everything up correctly. So the potential is huge, but this requires Ethereum 2.0 to exist. Until Ethereum 2.0 exists, what you have is, first of all, the existing Ethereum chain. But the existing Ethereum chain is already basically 100% full, and it's been full for a while. And we could do out of marginal things to increase its scalability, but like, even still, it's relatively expensive. And so there's this other strategy that you could consider to do some short-term things, is basically to just use these second-tier blockchains as extra data layers. So Bitcoin Cash is one example. Ethereum Classic is another example. The reason not to use Bitcoin itself is basically because, like, even though Bitcoin has all this hash power and all these things, like the Bitcoin blockchain per byte is even more expensive, like way more expensive to put transactions in than the Ethereum blockchain, right? And so the idea is that if you have applications that don't need a huge amount of security, then you can just run them on these secondary blockchains instead. So the way that you do this is basically that you create a light client of those secondary blockchains inside of the Ethereum blockchain. So inside of the Ethereum blockchain, you basically would just write the same code that you would write inside any of these Bitcoin light nodes. So it's sometimes called SPV as well, in case people have heard of SPV but not light clients. They're the same thing. So you just verify one block header every 10 minutes or whatever, and as long as the chain doesn't get 51% attacked, you're fine. And then later on, you can verify that any particular piece of data was included by verifying Merkle branches. So with this technique, basically the idea is that if I use one of these layer 2 schemes and where I can kind of change the results of the state of the system, the balances inside of the system, by just publishing data onto another blockchain that then gets verified, or maybe verified if needed by Ethereum later, then what I can do is just make that transaction on this other blockchain, and as soon as that transaction gets confirmed, I have some level of security for whatever the thing is that I'm trying to do. And in the normal case, that's basically all that you need to do. And then when you withdraw, you can verify Merkle proof. When you, if someone tries to submit something that's incorrect, you can play one of these challenge games where if someone detects something's incorrect, they can submit a fraud proof and all these things. So for these games to work, you do need this data availability layer, so it's important to stress this concept, right? Basically, the idea here is that you need some kind of platform that provides kind of common knowledge on the question of whether or not this particular piece of data has been published in some order and is accessible for anyone to download. And that's kind of what blockchains do, and if you don't have a blockchain, that's very hard to do. And so theoretically, you can just use any blockchain for this task. So Bitcoin Cash is nice because it's it inherits the very nice and simple design from Bitcoin itself, so that you have these simple block headers. Proof of work is SHA-256. They're very low gas cost to verify. With Joseph Chow's work on BTC Relay, we actually basically wrote the code for verifying them back in 2016. So this is all really nice. And for verifying data, you have these really nice simple Merkle branches that are just verifying one hash after the other, and they're just really easy to verify. So in many ways, it's a really nice target. And also, of course, the fact that its blocks are big, so you have 32 megabytes every 600 seconds, which is 53 kilobytes a second, is a big plus. So that's all big advantages for it. A lot of other blockchains don't really have nice light client protocols in the same way, right? So even though Ethereum itself, for example, is technically light client friendly, it has the weakness that, first of all, blocks come every 14 seconds, and because of that, you have 40 times more blocks, and the block headers are 6 times bigger, and there isn't really a way of being a light client without downloading all of these block headers. And so and then the proof of work is SHA-256. It's this thing called ETH hash, which is much more complicated to verify. So there's a lot of complexities in using Ethereum-derived blockchains for this. So which is why, like I mentioned Ethereum Classic, but given the technology of today, it's a less good choice. But if Ethereum Classic implements a Fly client, which greatly increases the efficiency of light clients, then that would greatly improve its viability. And then if they reduce the gas cost of transaction data, which is also what we're planning to do, like we do on the Ethereum side, that will increase our data scalability. So that could be a viable option. So that's another possible route. But then, of course, now you have a lot of these people saying, oh, well, I have a blockchain here, I have a blockchain here, I have a blockchain here. And theoretically, right, there's this entire kind of curve of blockchains where you have the kind of premium ones like Bitcoin and Ethereum, basically, that have this very high relatively level of security, but they also have higher transaction costs because more people want to do stuff on them. And then you have these kind of lower and lower tier blockchains that basically just end up making this different trade-off where you have lower security, but transaction space is cheaper, which is fine because you have fewer nodes verifying it. So as long as any of them are kind of efficiently light client verifiable, then you can use them as layer 2s in this way. Now, in the long term, of course, I expect ETH 2.0 to be the layer 2 that makes the most sense, because if you're building an Ethereum application, you're trusting Ethereum anyway, so you might as well just build things on Ethereum. But in the meantime, it's, I think, an interesting thought experiment in what you can do with like short-term interoperability between blockchains.
Yeah, and now you talked about the data storage capability utilizing the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. And we've talked about how the bigger blocks allow for more transactions, more data, ergo. But what about that particular area of the transaction, the op return, which is limited a little bit on Bitcoin Cash, but enabled versus BTC? How do you foresee that limitation while conducive on the op return?
It's like basically the nice thing about the op return is that it does create a field which is especially designed for putting basically junk data on. And like it's nice to have that as this kind of specialized functionality, because that means that nodes that don't care about that data can just immediately prune it, and nodes that do want it can download it. So that's nice. In the long term, right, a blockchain can't prevent data from being part of the chain if people are willing to pay transaction fees, because you can disguise data as a transaction in just so many ways. You can't stop all of them. But if you have blockchains that create are kind of more explicitly friendly to staking data in them, it does make it easier to use them in this way.
Got it. Got it. And have you reached out to the Bitcoin Cash developer community to talk about this proposal?
I talked to Amori, and he basically said, I mean, this was really interesting, but I could see it being controversial. The Ethereum Classic people reached out on Twitter, and I suggested the EIPs that they could add to make it work on Ethereum Classic. And they seem interested in doing them. Like basically, it's just Fly client for like line improvements and call data gas cost reduction. And those are things that I think are good for Ethereum Classic, regardless of whether or not any kind of linking with Ethereum is happening. But like, there have been projects to do this linking of Ethereum Classic and Ethereum. So the Peace Bridge happened recently, and then Loy Lu did this smart pool thing that contained in a light client in Solidity. So it's definitely a totally viable path.
Yes. And is there anything else that you're seeing coming out of the Bitcoin Cash community in terms of project developments like the SLP tokens that also share sort of a spirit animal with Ethereum?
I forget actually. Do you know, are SLP tokens light client friendly?
I'm not too sure. I believe they are. I can double check.
I really wish they are, right? Because like if they're like the problem with the Bitcoin Cash chain specifically is that they make this trade-off of valuing like there's big blocks, and so it becomes much harder to run a full node, which makes having good light client protocols for everything much more important. So if you don't have light client protocols, then there's like little point in having these things. But like if SLP tokens are light client friendly, that's an improvement. Though I guess, I mean, in practice, the other thing I'm concerned with the thing I'm concerned with from a security point of view is, of course, just having a hash power that's lower than many individual Bitcoin mining pools, many of which are potentially hostile. But then, like ETC faces a similar problem too, and they even got 51% attacked once. So there's, like, I definitely think that these blockchains should all consider switching to proof of stake, or at least some kind of hybrid proof of stake, but that's another like big controversial thing. From a usability point of view, I think the 10-minute block time is another issue. And I know there's this work being done around Avalanche and trying to reduce Eurocon for reduce it, but I think just cutting down the block time the traditional way is valuable too.
Great, great. And just want to confirm there officially, it is a light client that's friendly on the SLP tokens. So yeah, yeah, and there's, you know, it's very much similar to all the different stuff you can do, fungible, non-fungible tokens. But yeah, I suggest you might want to catch, if you're on Telegram or on Twitter, you might see the Spice token flying around. And so that is a BCH SLP token.
Okay.
And quite a bit of tipping use for content, which is pretty
cool.
Great. Now, just to conclude, we kind of covered a lot of ground there. You talked about, you know, how we can kind of come together, whether it's the Bitcoin Cash community, or you mentioned ETC, and there's potentially some other blockchains that might be a nice fit. We often see a lot of tribalism in the crypto industry. I'm sure you're more aware than anybody. And this is very refreshing to see an ecumenical take to kind of bring people together in a common goal and purpose. So what are your thoughts on coming together?
Yeah, and I think blockchain communities coming together and working together more is great. And it's something we definitely, I think, really strive for in Ethereum plans. Like we've been creating these bridge projects. We had BTC Relay back in 2016. We've been doing these Ethereum Classic bridges recently. I know Kyber is looking at making some other bridges. Also, like relations with the Zcash community, for example, are quite friendly, and we do things like there's some Zero ZK Snark things that we end up co-funding, and a lot of general value alignment there. So It's like I think the Ethereum community it definitely has a kind of open door to like any blockchain community that's doing legitimate technical work. I mean, Craig Wright and BSB should obviously burn, but hmm,
There it is. There
otherwise,
it
yeah.
is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, awesome. On that note, I want to thank you again for joining us. We're all right. All right. We are back. Thank you for sticking around to watch our full Vitalik interview. That was certainly something. He is full of information, full of knowledge. He's one of these OG crypto people. You know, he's top of the charts when it comes to the big names in the space. He has a lot of great things to say in terms of the state of Ethereum scaling, what's going on with Bitcoin Cash, and why it could actually complement the solution there, at least in the short term. So now we had the interview, you stuck around, you checked it out. We want to hear from you. What's your reaction? We have some comments that are going on in multiple chats. We got some comments over here, we got some comments over there. Let's see what some of the folks have to say, shall we? Okay, and make sure that you tip. There we go. Bitcoin Cash, Brotalik just tipped us about 49 cents in Bitcoin Cash. So let's see what the folks at home have to say. Somebody here, Major Pain, talk about Cash Script. Interesting. You know, that's something that could have been worked in for sure. Someone named Ash Vecchio says Spice token, will get listed on Binance. Who knows? We will see. We will see. Colin instead says, tell him to go all in on Spice. I'm sure he's thinking of that. Danny Patrick, we're almost there. They're talking about SLP tokens. Can we get to Spice tokens? Wow, Spice is really a number one topic for the chat for sure. As another note, the Spice token is in no way related to CoinSpice officially. It is an independent project that just happens to love Spice as much as we do. And let's keep going. Let's keep going. We have people saying, we have, what is it here? Bowl Smoker saying BCH plus ETH equals Beth. Possible new acronym. Very interesting. We have, let's see. Josh Ethelthorpe. I think lots of conversations that don't manifest. I tend to believe things are happening when I see people actively working on code for them. Interesting little point there. Little developer side note. So we have some cool folks in here. A lot of good humor, a lot of engagement, a lot of enjoyment of the interview for sure. Here we go. Emily Delara. She talks about how possibly there needs to be questions asked about the regulations and what he may have purchased. Yeah, we can get back to that. Keep going up. Let's keep going up. And yeah, let's finish off. Over here, we have someone named Colin saying A+ interview. Well, that's a great note to leave off on. Thank you so much for sticking around. This has been the debut, the inaugural CoinSpice Live. We had a great time going over some of the latest stories, checking out Mike and Space report, all you need to know when it comes to transactions and where the market is going. we had a little look-see over to Twitter, what people are chittering about, and we then went into and explored that interview with Vitalik, covered a lot of ground. He certainly did. And my take on it was that this is definitely not something that's cemented. This is not set in stone, especially when it comes to the reaction from the more institutional Bitcoin Cash community. Do they see this as something that's good? Do they see this something as perhaps distracting? I think there is a segment on the BCH crew that definitely believe monetary usage should be what is spotlight, and trying to then get into this idea of, hey, thank you very much, Hayden, for the tip in Bitcoin Cash. If I did not mention already, you can follow the link that scrolls above, or go in the description, click the link there to go to our tip page, tip us in Bitcoin Cash, because we love to use Bitcoin. That's what it's about. Back to my take. If there are monetary uses and then these data uses of a blockchain, then there is sort of this distraction in terms of what should the blockchain be used for. What is happening? Is there swelling of, not necessary data, not the most efficient ways to actually use a blockchain to get to the goal that a lot of people see as the primary, which is how do we bring global, P2P, permissionless, censorship resistant, stable cash to the world. And getting into realms of data storage definitely could be somewhat of a distraction, could somehow, tangle up the ways that happens, how fast that happens, what developers are attracted to which segments. So there's definitely a vocal group there that's trying to get those messages out. But at the same time, there's no doubt that Ethereum, with its number 2 market cap, with just the attention it's garnered in terms of really no other coin laying claim to this smart contract, to this application layer, to this, real, how do we make utilization of these blockchains that connect into better UI, better UX, and more advanced features. And having that somehow overlap with Bitcoin Cash, and seeing if there's any seepage of developers, of businesses that come back and forth now that there's a bridge to walk across. There's certainly something there that could be gained from the Bitcoin Cash side and also from the Ethereum side. So it is definitely something that is still in the works. By any means, don't take this as this is happening in the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. But see this as a potentiality that really could bring together 2 coin communities, 2 coins that are, again, number 2 respectively and number 5 in market cap. And who knows what that could do to the markets after an integration is made. So, that is my take on the interview. That's my take on the proposal. We heard some great takes from the chat. We got some great tips. I'm just looking at the chat again. You guys are great. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's... Great tip over there. We got a great tip from Mr. Calvin. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for sticking around, for watching. This is our first one. Again, we're going to start expanding this. We're going to have a lot of great interviews, so many cool folks. We're going to have cool segments. We're going to have funny stuff. We're going to have interesting stuff. It's going to be a variety of different content, all in one show, all live, all coming at you, all with some sweet vaporwave aesthetics and music playing in the background. So once again, smash, and I'm saying smash it. I want the keyboard key broken when you hit subscribe to the CoinSpice YouTube channel. Hit us up on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. Keep up with all our latest articles, our memes, our videos. Make sure to follow that. Go to coinspice.io. That's our site. That's where you can see everything at full length, cover it all, as well as, we're not done. We have so many spicy related products for you, as well as going to the Spice store. You can go to the Spice store, get your very own Spice shirt. We have so many different types. The best seller is CoinSpice t-shirt. Make sure you can walk around. You might not want to throw out, hey, I'm an ETH head. Hey, I'm a BCH head. You know, I'm into Bitcoin. Some people don't exactly like branding themselves in the wild with that. But if you want to be a little bit more subtle, if you want to be a little bit more swag as well, pick yourself up a CoinSpice t-shirt. Not only a CoinSpice t-shirt, but we're just coming out with some CoinSpice socks. So if you want to be a little bit more on the down low, but still repping your crypto and CoinSpice pride, get these cool CoinSpice socks. Again, you can go to coinspice.io. You can see in the menu, the navigation bar, hit store, and you can scroll down, see all these cool options. And guess what? This isn't where the Bitcoin usage ends. You can pay for all those products, the shirts, the socks, with Bitcoin Cash. Yes, Bitcoin Cash first. That's the type of business you're dealing with CoinSpice. Everything we do is Bitcoin Cash first. So make sure to pick up those products. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. And make sure to just stay spicy. I'm Peter Ryan. You can follow me at _Peter Ryan on Twitter. I come out with some spicy takes, some dank memes, but also some in-depth analytical research here and there. So in case you're into charts and if you're into data, make sure to follow my tweets to catch up on all the latest stuff there. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. This is CoinSpice Live. Everyone stay spicy, and we are out.